Hey guys, my name is Camilla and welcome back to the Dye Free Baker. On today's video, I'm going to be talking to you about something that plagues all cookie decorators, and that is color bleed. Now, there's no way to really fix color bleed once it's happened, but there are a lot of ways that you can prevent it from happening, even without using artificial food dye. So, in today's video, I'm going to be sharing all the tips and tricks that I know to help you prevent color bleed naturally. Let's dive in. Before I start today's video, I want to remind you guys that if you enjoy watching everything to do with natural food coloring and dye-free decorating, remember to hit that subscribe button and like this video. The number one thing that affects color bleed and causes color bleed to happen is got to do with poor icing structure. There are many ways that you are sabotaging yourself by not having good icing structure to begin with. If you can fix these problems with your icing structure, the likelihood of color bleed happening is almost zero. So, I'm also going to be providing a free downloadable guide that you can find in the caption, and it will have all of these points in bullet form to help you nail that icing structure and prevent color bleed from even happening. The first one is to over or under mix your icing. Most of the time, people are worried about over mixing their icing when they don't realize that you can also under mix your icing. So it's important to follow the recipe that you have been given for your icing and make sure that you adhere to the times that it gives for how long to mix your icing. Included in that is using a paddle instead of a whisk. A whisk attachment introduces too much air and causes overmixing much quicker than a paddle attachment. Another issue contributing to bad icing structure is adding water or thinning your icing before you've reached your desired color. Often we want to make our lives easier by thinning the icing before coloring it. I understand that this is a lot easier on your hands and your wrists when mixing color, but unfortunately it contributes to poor icing structure because it introduces too much air. And so you always want to add your color, reach the desired shade that you're looking for, and then thin to consistency. Another thing that leads to poor icing structure, you might have guessed it, is adding too much color or over saturating your icing. You always want to err on the side of caution and use a little bit less color than you think you need and allow the color to develop. This is critical when it comes to natural colors. They take much longer to develop. So make sure that you start your icing further in advance when using natural colors so that you don't have to add too much and cause oversaturation. The last few tips have less to do with the icing structure and more to do with how you decorate. So my first piece of advice would be to not use icing consistencies next to each other that are different. And what I mean by this is if you are using a wet on wet technique, make sure that both icing consistencies that are going onto this design are either both a flood consistency or both a hybrid consistency. Often when using a flood and a hybrid consistency icing next to each other, one will dry quicker than the other, and that causes the color to pull in and bleed into the color next to it. If you are adding layers or different details on top of a flood layer of icing, it's important to allow that base layer to crust over before adding details. Leaving it overnight or too long where it has dried too much will also cause color bleed for the same reason as putting two consistencies next to each other. The dry layer of icing will absorb moisture from the wet layer of icing that you're putting on top, and the likelihood of color bleed is a lot higher. In addition, using a thicker consistency of icing for details will also help prevent color bleed from happening for the same reason. We also want to have good airflow when our cookies dry, and so using a dehydrator or drying your cookies in front of a fan is important to allow that airflow to happen. Using artificial food dye, many times it's recommended to add titanium dioxide or white food coloring to your icing to help prevent color bleed. You can use cream of tartar instead of white food coloring, and it acts in a similar way to help prevent color bleed if you don't want to use artificial food color. Those are my best tips for helping you prevent color bleed naturally. Please remember that I've created a link to a free downloadable guide with all of these points in, and it's down in the caption. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button and like so that I know to make more content like this. And once again, thank you for watching.